Greetings and welcome to Hillcrest Cellar 44 Wine Club video notes. We have actually our very last tasting and release of the season. So we're taking off here for the summer and then we'll see you again in the fall. But as I normally do, we have actually kind of a theme to this tasting. And the theme is kind of ancient varieties. The varieties that we're going to be tasting today are Teroldego, Carignan Grenache, blend, and then Gamay. And all of these varieties go back to at least the 15th century in Europe and are very, very classic varieties, two of which make very big wines. Then, of course, Gamay that makes some of the most beautiful kind of supple, fruity wines in the world. But also, I think, as you've tasted from us before, our Gamay Rosé, which is the Rose of Burg. So without further ado, we'll kind of move into the first wine. So this is, we released a 2020 Teroldego. This is the Reserva. And so this is a selection of that fruit that was aged longer, about a year and a half longer. So this was actually aged 4 years, but this also has a little bit more new wood on it and kind of a different mixture of wood. Teroldego is a variety actually that's not very well known today. If you go back about 30 years ago, there were 500 acres of it in the world, all in northern Italy, in Trento area. So as you drop down from like the Austrian, Italian border in the Alps, you drop down into the Trento area. And actually, Teroldego means the golden variety of Trento, but it's a variety that was very, very famous. Even the Habsburgs, or the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was one of their favorite varieties, and it was used straight up as well as a blender to add color and acid and that to the wines. We were the first ones to introduce it in early 2000s into Umpqua Valley to plant it, and the first official bottling was 2015. So the 2020 Reserva is meant to be very kind of big, very dramatic, but very age-worthy. So it has a little bit more structure and kind of power than we saw in the 2020, which was a very big wine. And although we don't enter our wines in tastings in that, at the recent Umpqua Valley Wine Growers tasting down at Seven Feathers, the professional tasting panel deemed it best read in Umpqua Valley, which is a nice thing. So anyway, without further ado, we'll give her a taste here. And about 100 cases made, so it's a very small production. Very, very dark color. And this kind of, you know, when I think, I've thought over the years, what is Teroldego, to try to express and define it to people. And Teroldego is almost like a Petite Syrah crossed with Cabernet Franc. You get that juicy, beautiful fruit, super rich black color, but you get this like slight herbaceousness, beautiful acidity and kind of raciness to it. And that comes through in the nose. I get this kind of like what the French call garrigue, which is the smell of some of the herbs that grow like in Provence and that, real beautiful things that we kind of cook with, and that sage and rosemary, thyme kind of thing. But it's like this sweet character and that super black cassis character, but very, very intense and powerful. The additional time in the barrel has really softened this. The fruit is almost sweet, but the acid is super integrated with the tannins. The tannins are very fine, they're there. But where like a Petite Syrah has kind of chunky, chewy tannins and that, these are super elegant and beautiful, and that's what the time does to the wine. I remember the 2020, we'll call it the Normale bottling, was a little bit more kind of chunky and coarse. This is very refined and beautiful. And it finishes, there's almost, in the nose, there's a little bit of this, but in the mouth, almost a little bit of like a brown sugar character. I think that comes from firing of the barrel, but super, super beautiful. But a wine with like roasted meats, as we move into the spring and like roasted lamb or barbecues and that, this is really beautiful and stands up to things that are very kind of intense. So hopefully you enjoy that. That's super delicious. I think that's maybe the best Teroldego we've made. Next up, Poboleda, which we've made for many years with our friend Jordi in Priorat, Spain. It's a 22 vintage, which is kind of an extreme of all the vintages that we've produced since 2010. 2022, one of the local winemakers in that area said about 2022 is it was 6 months of summer. It was hot the entire summer. They had a lot of weeks that had like at least about, what they say, 40 Celsius, 140 degrees is a high temperature, which is very, very warm. And an area, once again, doesn't cool down a lot at night, but it's all rocky, so it absorbs that heat and then radiates that heat at night. The amazing thing about this is this has has quite a bit more Grenache. It's 60% Carignan, one of the most noble varieties of the world that dates back to the 14th century in Zaragoza. So central Western Pyrenees, the capital city of Zaragoza, that was the head of the, or the anchor capital city for the Aragonese that ruled most of Europe. So you see Carignan planted not throughout Spain only, but France. I think in the late 80s, actually, it was the #1 variety in France. So a lot of people have had Carignan not knowing it because the wines are called after the appellation, especially southwestern France, southern part of France. You move into northern Italy, they do Carignano. So it's a variety that's very well known there. But this vintage has a blend with quite a bit more Grenache, and Grenache tends to have kind of a sweetness, not only of fruit in the mouth, but of perfume and kind of red fruit. So we'll go looking for that. But 2022 vintage. It's amazing. We oftentimes think of, people talk about black fruit characteristics and red fruit, and they're kind of categories. Red fruit I usually associate with cooler climate, lighter reds. This has it, even though this is a fairly warm area, the Grenache still powers through with this beautiful red, and there's almost like a little bit of like a licorice character to it, or anise. But you can smell the sweetness, but it's this kind of almost like milky chocolate kind of sweetness to it. It's beautiful. Much more creamy, very, very rich. I don't know if I've got milk chocolate on the brain, but it's got that kind of that sweet kind of softness that has. Super fine tannins. Carignan can have very, very aggressive tannins. These are very, very fine, so like fine grit sandpaper. And I actually notice them, which is interesting, not so much on the front of my palate, but on the front of my tongue. But very, very gentle. But a very big wine, but very silky, kind of soft, and a wine that's really drinking beautifully now, even though it's 22, but a wine that's destined to probably age at least about 10 years or whatnot. But that's the Poboleda 2022. And then to finish up with, we have the Rose of Burg, which is our rosé that is more of a provincial style, which is kind of Provence down in the southeastern part of France, southern end of the Rhone Valley, and then up against the Italian border, a little bit warmer. And so the wines tend to be more full-bodied, and it's a warm area, and there's a lot of money there. We know, the famous cities that are Marseille and this, but people drink a lot of rosé and really crisp whites in the middle of the summer. And the idea is you're having the wine with food instead of just kind of as a beverage by itself. So you want body, you want texture. And when we talk about wine and food pairing, texture is a key element. And so the texture of this, I would expect it, and I make it to be very kind of creamy and rich. So it's a little bit more serious than just kind of a soft, fruity rosé. And many of you already know this, but we'll take it for a spin here. Yeah, there's kind of like a strawberry. I'd almost go like strawberry jam and then watermelon stick character to this. There's a beautiful kind of like very tangy kind of red fruit character to it in the nose. It's nice. The two things that hit me, once again, kind of the weight of the wine and then the acidity. It's got this nice, very kind of, savory acidity to it that's very even throughout the entire wine. It doesn't show up a lot in the beginning or the end, and that all the way through the wine, but rich in texture. Also a little bit of phenolics. When you look at the diet of like the Alsatians, so northeastern France and that, where they eat a lot of rich foods, but they drink wine, they have a little bit of bitterness built into the wines and that, and you get a little bit of richness and weight. And this isn't necessarily bitter, but this wine has a little bit of phenolic if you go looking for a little bit of like dryness on the tongue, and that's to help give you weight and texture that will stand up to the weight and texture of kind of the lighter to medium bodied fare that you'd find in that part of the world. So very, very beautiful, rich, a wine that's meant to really have at the table, with cheese and that kind of thing, but definitely something to have with food, Monday through Sunday for lunch, if you're living the good life. So with that, I would like to say thank you very much for allowing our family to live its dream and produce wines and discover the power of Umpqua Valley. And would like to say what we have in the barrel, the 24 and 25 vintages are the two best vintages we've ever had in the barrel. So look forward to those 24s being released next year, some of those wines, as we get into the fall season. So with that, to the genie in the bottle, cheers.